Welcome to Prime Suspects. Alongside Adam Bjorn and Prime Sports co-founder Joe Brennan Jr., I'm your host, Matt Landis. Adam, 2 legs of horse racing's Triple Crown, 2 upsets. How did Napoleon Solo prevailing at the Preakness as a 10-1 underdog fare for you from both sides of the counter?
Ended up a good result. Not so much of an upset. I think it was, by the end of it, it ended up probably 3rd or 4th pick in the betting. My take on it last week was lay all the favorites. Iron Honor and Chip On Show ended up like 9s and 10s, bigger price than Napoleon at the end of the day. There was some smart money on Napoleon as well. Just going back and a few mentions of, watching one of his prep races and how he ran. He may have finished 5th, but he actually had a pretty decent run against some pretty good horses in that race as well. So all in all, the favorites didn't win, so it was a good result. Matchups were good because we really went against Taj Mahal and Ocello, which ran 4th, and the others beat him. So all in all, there's 3rd one to come, and we should have all the good horses back.
And as we await the Belmont, what would you say about perhaps the most noteworthy insights you've taken away from the last week of the NBA and NHL playoffs?
So ended up yesterday, Cleveland getting through with a good result for the Game 7. Not great for the series. And as I've said before, pretty big exposure on the conference and the title there. We all expect OKC to just walk through this thing and win it. Right now, it's the results have fallen fair. There's been no real big surprises, I think, in that second round like there was in the first one. So everyone's just gone on with their business. And now we're getting ready for the next round. Game 1's Spurs Thunder coming up. Still got a Game 7 tonight in the hockey. I think the next series will be going back a bit closer to round 1 where there should be a lot more competitive nature. Although at the end of the day, Piston Cavs was a pretty good series as well.
And on that note, what kind of volume disparity are you seeing tonight between Canadians Sabres Game 7 and Spurs Thunder Game 1?
Definitely the home team's got about 80% of the money so far. Again, it's hockey. There's not a ton of money on it, but it's definitely leaning towards Buffalo for Game 7 right now.
All right, Joe, let's bring you into the fold at this point. SportTrade last week announced it's exiting online sports betting, with wagering ending May 25th and the platform shutting down on June 26th. SportTrade built the U.S. exchange model before Kalshi. It got licensed in 5 states and got outflanked when prediction markets went federal via the CFTC. Their sign-off was to stay tuned for what's next. So what do you make of this as a cautionary tale about playing by the rules, or as proof that state-by-state licensing can't compete with a federal framework? And overall, what do you anticipate coming next from SportTrade?
Well, unfortunately, SportTrade, we really like those guys. I mean, Alex is our one and only guest host on our podcast over our long and prestigious history. I'm sure our dozens of listeners will remember that. They proved that old adage that being early is the same as being wrong. I mean, I've lived that, like in DFS Plus when we launched really fast fantasy and fast picks. And, the zig that we missed in that, which was instead of using fantasy scores, just completely ignoring the federal definition and just turning them into a compendium of prop plays, right? The zag that SportTrade misses is that they were so early and so earnest about doing things the right way, the same way that we did, that they, the guys, the transgressors are the ones who seem to have been rewarded here. Crypto.com were the first to take sports contracts. Kalshi followed, and the rest is history. I really do hope, at least for their sake, because they won, they're good guys. We like them. And, they did. They played by the rules. They tried to go the hard way. 2, because I like their interface. I think their product is really great. It's certainly better than anything that's currently on offer right now in the prediction marketplace. So if it's getting approved by CFTC to open their own DCM, just love all the abbreviations nowadays, right? I really do hope that they have an opportunity to get their legs underneath them in this market. It is going to be an uphill battle. Arriving late, but that one's going to be really tough. We definitely know how that one goes, arriving late to the New Jersey regulated sports betting market with Prime, and it's been an uphill climb ever since. I hope that those guys do get this kind of second opportunity. They didn't do what, like, say, Novig and ProfitX did, turn in their license to go and be sweeps operations, and now those guys are pivoting from sweeps into becoming DCMs. One of these days, the good guys have got to win. and I hope it's them.
All right, well, from one company giving it a rest as far as online sports betting goes, to the founder of another company going to the mattresses, DraftKings co-founder Matt Kalish, who stepped down as president on March 31st but remains on the board, took to Twitter this past weekend to tear into prediction markets, specifically Kalshi. His post showing Kalshi offering 93-1 on a $10 bet on Brooks Koepka to win the PGA Championship, but only 38-1 on a $1,000 bet got more than 1 million views. He called the product 2 to 3 years of development away from regulated sportsbooks and said casuals who try it get decimated. Joe, you posted earlier today that this has to be the most ironic run on sports betting Twitter in history, and Kalish engaged in some back and forth with you. So get us started here with your point of view.
Geez, he's just been hitting that like Heisenberg blues since late last week, hasn't he? I was actually chatting back and forth with another friend in our industry. Is this Kalish or is this like a Kalish AI bot? Because he's posting huge volumes and at all hours of the day. So I don't know what got into him, except maybe because he has such a large stake in DraftKings as one of the founders, is this need to talk up the book. You know, right now, when it comes to narrative, public markets, raising funds, you know, having the wind in their sails, everything's going the prediction market's way right now, right? So going out there and, you know, he's just an ironic guy to be going out there and saying like the emperor has no clothes. I mean, especially this recent one today where he's talking about, you know, Kalshi handing over in their feed the identities of the people to their market makers who are placing combos or parlay orders so that they can potentially limit them. I'm like, I thought it was the funniest damn comment I've seen on Twitter in a while. The guy goes by Peanut. He said, like, this is like watching Marlboro's CEO go on a 4-day jag complaining about the terrible qualities of vaping. I don't have any, you know, Mr. Kalish, if you're out there, don't know why you'd be watching this one, but I don't know why he took such exception to my saying that this is ironic, that he's not exactly what I would call a reliable narrator when it comes to talking about these things. I don't want to debate the merits about what he said about, you know, Kalshi, because then what I'll get into is like, tell me how what you're saying about Kalshi is any different substantively to what DraftKings does every goddamn day. I just think this is so hilarious. It's, you know, if this was an effort to get out there and kind of change the narrative, take some wind out of Kalshi's sails and get it back behind the state licensed sports books. I credit him for having the brio to go out there and try and do it on his own. I think this is not particularly in his interest or DraftKings' interest to do something like that. They need, you know, disinterested third parties weighing in on this. I mean, let's be honest. These guys, I loved Michael Lewis referred to these guys as the Beverly Hillbillies of sports betting, that being DraftKings. They're at the right place at the right time, having broken just enough of the right rules to put themselves in position to succeed. But they've not done anything since their inception as like the number 2 sports book in the United States that differentiates themselves in any way from the Kalshi guys. Is he maybe right about the user interface? Well, yeah, great. Is he saying anything particularly unique about like who their base is or anything like that? That, oh, it's institutions. Like, I don't think anybody really cares. I think people are enthusiastic about having institutionals come into this marketplace. It just means more money, right? Right now he's making distinctions without a difference between himself and Kalshi, and I don't know. I think maybe it's time for him to set aside the Heisenberg blue and take a couple of gummies and bring himself back to earth and let, you know, sports betting Twitter move on to something else.
And Adam, digging in a bit further to the root cause behind all this, Kalish posted side-by-side screenshots showing wildly different odds on the same Kalshi market depending on bet size. He says that's not a real product, but instead that it's thin liquidity where pro market makers pick off casual users. As someone who manages a book, how fair do you consider that read of how exchange pricing works?
Yeah, well, I mean, this goes back to conversations that have been long existing in the exchange world. It's a liquidity thing, a liquidity problem or a liquidity whatever it is. And what they're doing is the ability. Now, sportsbooks, I'm sure, would love to be able to do that. All right, you can get $100 at this price, $100 at the next price, and we'll take that one in so it rounds up to a single entity price. I mean, it's just some innovation of using what they have, the liquidity that's in the place and the odds that have it. On that actual pitch, it was quite amusing with Captain Jack firing back and said, yes, like the $10 is what DraftKings is offering, and that's all you can get. So, the other side is offering the 1,000, yes, at the reduced odds that's laddered down. And that's kind of when you really dig into it is, and this is where on the SportTrade side with Alex is probably the one disagreement we've had on, yes, they're doing penny markets, but if you wanted 10,000 and there's 1,000 liquidity, then it ends up being 30, 40 cents markets at the end of the day. When you go into the buy sells on these, on this interface, and again, I find the interface almost unbearable and difficult to try and use. But when you look at the buy and sell aspect of it, the margins are huge, because the liquidity is not there on both sides of the market. Everybody can get into this space and, pick the eyes out of what everyone's doing wrong. But, it's the hypocrisy of it is this is DraftKings 10 years ago. This was a gray area that they come into, that they build out. And now you have someone else doing it in their world that's doing it better. They're all different verticals. Everybody shouldn't be getting their knickers in a knot over this one's doing that. Concentrate on what your product is. DraftKings are in the prediction space. So what are they thinking about their own product? Flutter, which is the one that surprised me a little bit, and why they haven't taken that technology, the Betfair, and put it out the interface and put that in the marketplace. I think we've said this multiple times. It becomes very exhausting when the pre-show sort of links came through and I went through. I've never come across his. It looks like I was following, so maybe that might have been from some time ago. But he was 2 days of just going after Kelce, just trolling them and reposting, and obviously has too much money and too much time on his hands, and this is the bug up his ass right now. But you've got a product. You're now in prediction markets yourself. Are you building that, that product and that market? And when they said, the one thing that I did notice was, booking 1/500th of what DraftKings are booking. I mean, no one really knows who's booking what in that world. You've got all the traders in the back end. They're definitely taking exposure on themselves. There's obviously a handful of market makers in the whole space. The one thing he is right is any square, any recreational going in there is going to get destroyed. That's a big boys game in the exchange world, and I don't see how, the liquidity matches up over time, which has kind of been our argument for, I don't know, the past 2 years of liquidity, longevity, all those kind of things we see struggle with down the road. Have I changed my tune a little bit with the liquidity that's happening on there? Yeah, I mean, when you see 300 million plus matched on a golf major, whether those numbers are real, whether those, insider information and they're just trading between each other just to make that look big and fat because there's no excise tax or anything of that nature, who knows? But there is serious volume going through these machines. I expect they're going to have a massive advantage come World Cup with California, Texas, Florida, all the visitors that don't have social security numbers to sign up in New Jersey for the final and all these kind of things. They're going to be at the front and center of it again and just keep building on what they've been building. I mean, we'll see how it all plays out. We have enough shit on our plate right now just to get this merger and acquisition across the line, be ready for World Cup, watch these clowns on the sidelines.
In the end, it's exceedingly weak. I mean, DraftKings, if they really are, 500x the liquidity that, or 500x whatever, the money that Kelce is, well, then why the fuck is he even bothering? It's like the Barbra Streisand effect. Him complaining about him pointing it out, all he's doing is he's putting air in Kelce's sails. If I was him, and I was at the board of the number 2 sports betting company here in America, I wouldn't waste my time, especially since, every time he makes a point, it's like all he's got to do is you just got to hold the mirror up to those guys and change 1 or 2 vocabulary words. And it's like, what's any different than what you guys have done, right?
I know you guys have beaten this one up pretty thoroughly, but Adam, one more for you, then we'll move on to another topic. Kalish also said Wall Street market makers on Kelce carry a margin edge no less than 15% higher than sportsbooks, and that the whole thing is messaging being pushed by the same 3 groups to confuse this. From a trading perspective, how does the hold on a prediction market actually compare to that of a traditional sports?
Well, there is no way in hell these prediction markets or these market makers are holding. Well, if you're 15% above and they're holding 15 to 20 and whatnot, so he's saying they're holding 30, come on now. I mean, the margins are minuscule. You're offering both sides. You're offering the buy-sell. You've probably got margins at 1.5% max. And again, you're not the only market maker, so you're one of a piece of the queues, but they're all competing to sort of draw the next dollar based on their liquidity needs and things as well. So he's obviously just thrown that number out, really not knowing the math of how all this works. But there's no one in the FanDuel or DraftKings world that should be able to come and say, they're holding X amount over what we are, because there is no one gouging the industry as much as what FanDuel and DraftKings are when it comes to hold margins and all these kind of things as well. So the arguments are lightweight. If I had DraftKings, I wouldn't give two shits about Kalshi. I'd be just in my office every day going, okay, now we have predictions. Let's go after that. We have Ike Gaming. Why is he even bothering with this? It just seems, I don't even have the words for it.
All right, well, we will go ahead and move on that note from a hot topic that gained some steam this past weekend to a Senate hearing coming this week. The Senate subcommittee holds a hearing tomorrow titled No Sure Bets, Protecting Sports Integrity in America. American Gaming Association CEO Bill Miller and former Congressman Patrick McHenry, now with the Coalition for Prediction Markets, will testify at the same table in the first time a Senate body addresses prediction markets and sports betting integrity together. Meanwhile, 5 Democrats sent letters last week to 12 sportsbook and prediction market CEOs demanding answers on youth targeting by May 29th. Minnesota passed the first ever state legislative ban on prediction markets the same week Congress is holding this hearing. So how much of this is the beginning of a real federal framework as opposed to another cycle of hearings that produce headlines, but not necessarily legislation?
These hearings, if they can stay on track, which they haven't been able to. If you recall, towards the end of last year, Congress had a hearing about this. It was the Senate Judiciary Committee, and it was supposed to be about betting, athlete protection, things like that, and it descended almost immediately into should transgender athletes be allowed to compete in the NCAA. So it's debatable whether it even be able to stay on track. But if it does, really, these committee hearings, these public committee hearings, they're not necessarily for the committee. None of the testimony, none of the questions, none of that advances the ball whatsoever. It's more or less, it's a public airing for people to stake out their positions, their position statements, right? A little bit of grandstanding here or there, some pearl clutching. What really has to happen if you're going to have a durable federal structure around this? That's what has to be addressed in Congress. And right now, Congress really hasn't shown any interest in this right now. Everything's more or less been left to the courts to kind of hash out the yes-no question here. With Minnesota jumping in with both feet and essentially banning something, that just kind of escalates the inevitable trip up the hill to the Supreme Court, just adding more grist to the mill for that. But in the meantime, how are people breaking through on Capitol Hill, either on yay or nay on either side of this issue? Because I haven't seen a bill that's been introduced, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but I haven't seen a bill yet that was introduced that did anything other than talk about banning insider trading, which is already banned, or banning members of Congress from being able to trade. I don't expect them to really get into the weeds about if there's a federal future. What does it really look like? Because I don't think anybody who's serious can look at this right now and say, we have everything we need in place in order to be able to properly regulate these contracts, sports contracts, on the federal level. I mean, they even issued a memo where they're on certain contracts, they're not actually going to enforce infractions. Or smaller, lower level infractions. So this is the thing that concerns me, is that this is being treated so blithely right now. Yes, the administration has its own stake in this, and this thing, people seem to be really interested in ramrodding this through as quickly as possible to make it fait accompli, which is why the states are really left, the only other option is to litigate, and litigate so aggressively. There's so little time right now for anybody to do anything other than let's cover our ass and say members of Congress can't trade on this and that insiders can't trade on this, which is obvious. Bottom line is, I'm sure it'll be an interesting show. I'm sure everybody will get their position statements read into the record. And then from there, I don't know, it's a 50-50 whether we stay on track with this one or we just kind of diverge into other topics. I mean, maybe that'll be the Kalshi markets or polymarket markets overnight, is what will be the topic that the hearing will descend into transgender athletes, NIL, and all these other side tales.
All right, well, Adam, let's bring this full circle as we hit the home stretch. The NBA Conference Finals tip off tonight in the West and tomorrow in the East, with the NHL hot on its heels. So building on what you shared at the top of the show, what futures exposure are you seeing at Prime Sports and Bet, Chris? And what are you anticipating heading into these series?
So right now the Thunder's getting about 85% of the money over the Spurs in the series, but the game's pretty well split and good them at the 6.5. Again, our biggest exposure is Cleveland. The rest of them are pretty good right now. So that's the thing we'll be sweating for the most part.
And Joe, which storylines are you following most closely as the NBA and NHL playoffs hit their conference finals?
Well, I would like to continue to gild my throne as the mayor of Toutville here, since I picked the Knicks and OKC to face each other in the NBA championship. And right now, my money would be on the two of them making it through the conference championships to tilt against each other. But I'm a little more interested right now in the steamroller that's going on in the NHL, which is, will Carolina do a version in hockey of what like Moses Malone said about the Sixers back in '83 when they won the NBA title with faux. Although I think for Carolina it would be faux. Like, can anybody beat Carolina in the playoffs? Last week when Philadelphia issued their offseason injury list, they look like car crash victims. Carolina's just kicking the shit out of everybody. And I just wondered, well, can they be the first undefeated team in the modern era to go through the Stanley Cup playoffs? They sure look like they've got everything. And, all the other series, like, and Montreal, that's a toss-up. I'd like to see Buffalo win that one. And then, out west, okay, because of all the bookies who are lifelong Knights fans, I guess for those guys, let's hope VGK wins out in the end. But it's really hard to believe that anything's going to get in front of the Hurricane right now blowing through the playoffs.
On that note, we'll go ahead and wrap things up. To the audience, whatever you're watching for across the NBA and NHL conference finals, as we head toward a potential collision course to see which is the stronger storm between the Avalanche and the Hurricane. Thanks as always for tuning in. Have a safe and happy Memorial Day, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Prime Suspects. Register for Prime Sports at primesports.com and download the Prime Sports app. You can follow us on Twitter at PrimeSuspects_, at Joe Brennan Jr., and at Adam Bjorn. You must be 21 or over to play on Prime Sports. Always bet responsibly and within your limits. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER.